Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about what's on my phone, how I organize things, and the apps that I've been using in a particularly interesting way or in a way that's probably not as conventional. And I wanted to show this because these days I'm pretty sure that a lot of us are spending a lot of time on our phones. So we might as well take a day or so just to clear up our phones, organize things, and just to make things more efficient and our workflow more seamless. So I think that I actually spent some time doing all of this and reorganizing my phone. So I think all of that would be pretty helpful in terms of just understanding the apps that I use and the way I use them, just so that we all could make our lives more efficient and seamless as much as possible. So the way I've organized my apps is on the philosophy of a one-tap, two-tap approach. What that means is essentially all the apps that are not that useful or which I use on a rather infrequent basis, I've clubbed them into these multiple groups, which range from social, utilities, productivity, read, listen, move, learn, health, finance, and so on and so forth. And all the apps that I do use on a frequent basis, or that I think I should use on a frequent basis, are clubbed over here, from documents to Instapaper to Fantastical to Chuck and so on and so forth. And that's the idea. So the moment I want to access the apps that I like using or that I think I should be using more just because they are more productive or more informative, I have them right over here, which is from documents to Chuck. And the apps that I should not be using that frequently are actually out of my reach. So if you notice, for social, I have to go all the way up to my screen to tap this, and then it's only then that I have access to the social media apps. Many people say that it's better to delete all social media apps from your phone. I've tried doing that, but it's not that useful for me because it's also convenient at times. I get to know about a lot of events, a lot of informative tweets. Instagram, Snapchat are not that quote unquote useful, but LinkedIn and other apps are sort of informative, and it's kind of cool to have them. But if I keep them outside of my reach, it's useful because I'm not then getting addicted to it as much as possible. So I guess the first category that I'll start with is productivity. And for productivity, I have a few apps that are right at my disposal, and I'll go through them one by one. So let's start with Bear. Bear is essentially a note-taking app which allows you to create notes in Markdown. And that's perhaps the best part, because if you know Markdown, you can actually say create double headings over here, and I can write this is a note, and then blah blah blah, this is a YouTube video, and it's pretty cool because then even the search in Bear works pretty seamlessly. So let's say if I type podcast, what I'll get is essentially it has a sub search feature inbuilt into it, which is pretty useful. And that is something that I use for, say, noting down a lot of my quick thoughts, a lot of my podcast ideas, and just stuff in general. So that's a note-taking app that I've started using more often. The other note-taking app I find pretty useful is this app called Drafts. And what Drafts essentially does is that it allows you to dictate notes and take notes on the fly. So let's say if I'm running or if I'm driving somewhere, and if I'm listening to a podcast, what could happen is that I could come up with an interesting insight, but I want to make a note of it. So what I can do is on the Apple Watch, I'll just tap this, I don't know if you can see this, the drafts icon, and then I can essentially start dictating and say, this is a note. And when I say that, it automatically captures the voice and makes a note, and it's like a quick random access memory system that I have used for a lot of my quick notes. Then I also use Fantastical, which is a calendar app. And the reason I use Fantastical more than, say, Apple Calendar or Google Calendar is because creating events in this app is pretty seamless. So let's say if I want to write study with Shalin, who's a friend of mine, at 5:30 p.m. Tomorrow, it automatically understands that, and that natural language processing is pretty seamless for me. And if I say after 3 days, it also understands that, and it automatically adds that to Tuesday. And that's pretty cool because I guess getting rid of these sort of hurdles is really efficient in the long term, and you don't know in what places these hurdles could actually play a pivotal role in preventing you from being more seamless. But for me at least, I think having these minor tweaks and these little apps that have these great functionalities built in has been pretty cool. So as far as productivity goes, Bear, Drafts, Fantastical, then I obviously have these apps that I use on a less frequent basis. GoodNotes and Notability are the two best note-taking apps that I have. I mostly use them on my iPad, but I do have them on my phone because it's good to sync them up with the notes on my iPad. I haven't started that process yet, at least for GoodNotes, but I'll do that soon. As far as that goes, as far as productivity goes, I don't think I have anything else. Oh yes, Notion. Notion, if you've seen my other video, has been the best productivity app that I've used so far. And I would highly recommend for anyone to just get started with Notion and just organize their life, because it's a really useful app. And the mobile app is essentially a mobile version of the desktop app. And I don't know how I feel about that, but let's see how it goes. I hope they change the concept of the mobile app so it just does not reflect everything that's on the desktop, because at times it's harder to use the features on mobile that are essentially built for desktop, but let's see how that goes. That's as far as productivity goes. As far as read goes, and all the reading apps that I use, well, you have the classical news sources, WSJ. I have New York Times over here because I want to, read New York Times on a daily basis. Then I also have Economist over here. Then Kindle books. Reader is essentially an RSS app which allows you to sort of easily read the articles that or subscriptions that you're subscribed to, and that's pretty cool. So let's say over here, if I go, I see which accounts do I have. Well, I have Pocket, so I have tagged many articles with all of these keywords, and the good thing about Reader is that you can read it in a very distraction-free mode. And I kind of find it better than Pocket because Pocket restricts you to only one service, whereas Reader allows you to have, say, multiple services, and it's a bit easier to use in that regard. GoodReads is also a pretty cool app, mainly because it's like it adds the social dimension to your life for reading books. And that I think is pretty useful and pretty cool, because I can just go to my library and see, okay, I have read these many books. I can then mark quotes from that. I can see what things my friends have read. So I see that Andrew, who's a good friend of mine, has read The Pleasures of the Damned poems, and I'll probably talk about that with him. And that's a pretty cool thing. It also syncs with your Kindle, and it has all your highlights in one place. So I think just downloading these cool sort of underrated apps is a good thing, especially for the long term, because it just motivates you just a little bit to learn more and read more. That's as far as reading goes. I guess then I'll go to social, and for social I think it's pretty clear, the classic basic LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Tinder, WhatsApp, Facebook. Messenger Kids is essentially an app that one of my friends told me to download, and I've been also convincing a lot of my friends to do the same. It's essentially for the kids of parents, so their kids can talk with other kids in a much safer environment. So these are the conversations that I've had. It's pretty useless, but it's a fun app to have at the same time. Then GroupMe and HootSuite. HootSuite is a cool app because what it does is it allows you to create one post and post it on multiple social media channels at the same time. So for now at least, I've connected Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. But in the future, I could definitely connect Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and so on and so forth. So that's a cool app. YouTube is pretty boring. That's pretty much it for social. As far as utilities go, utilities consist of the apps that I don't use on a regular basis, but it's good to have them because when you do need to use them, they are actually pretty useful. And Zoom is one of them, definitely, right? Apart from that, there is Cam Scanner, which I'm pretty sure everyone knows about. VPN-Super Unlimited Proxy. This is a cool app because whenever I'm using, say, a public Wi-Fi, say at an airport, or if I'm at a coffee shop, I can just quickly create a VPN, and that essentially allows me to basically not have. Oops, I should probably not do this right now because it's screen recording, but it allows me to create a virtual private network which saves my identity from anyone who's trying to steal any information. So that's a cool app which adds a lot of safety to your internet connection whenever you're trying to connect to a public Wi-Fi. OneBlocker is also a pretty useful app because it blocks all ads that you come across on Safari and on other places. And the best part is that it syncs seamlessly with your Safari app. So let's say I go to settings, I go to, where's Safari? Safari, I go to content blockers, and I've essentially enabled everything that OneBlocker needs access to in order for it to block all ads, annoyances, comments, social, etc., etc. And that's a cool app. It's like AdBlock but for phone. That's pretty much what I use in utilities. Then as far as my finance app goes, the basic Wells Fargo. Deserve is essentially a student's credit card system that allows you, that gives you a lot of cash back and builds your credit score if you're a student. So I could recommend that, but it's like just another app out of the billions that exist over there if you want to build your credit score. Then Venmo and Mint is essentially a finance management app that tells you a lot of insights about where exactly you're spending. It just automatically links to your credit card or debit card and then gives you weekly reports about how your spending has been. Robinhood, by far one of the most useful finance apps that I've downloaded. Obviously right now I'm investing nothing because the stock market is pretty volatile right now, and I decided to not go into it at the moment. And yeah, these are the stocks that I'm following. Robinhood is a pretty cool app to also consume, any finance related news. So that's where I usually go if I want to read anything about Wall Street. Yeah, that's pretty much it as far as finance goes. As far as my photography apps go, Filmic Pro is one app that I've used a lot to shoot my 4K videos, shoot my YouTube videos, and that's been pretty useful. It essentially turns your iPhone into a professional, say DSLR or another camera, and it gives you most of the features that say that that camera will have. So let's say if I have this, right? There's the zoom over here, and I guess I can just sort of shoot over there. So yeah, these are the multiple sort of cool things that Filmic Pro gives you, and yeah. I really haven't tried most of these features, but I guess as time goes, I'll probably be more familiar with those features and I may use them. DJIMimo is an app that I use for my gimbal, which if I'm vlogging, it's pretty cool that it connects automatically to my gimbal, and it through various sensors lets the gimbal know where to stabilize my iPhone and where not to. So that's also a pretty useful app that I use. As far as music goes, I have Spotify and Overcast. Spotify is essentially, I use it mainly for listening to music, but at the same time, at times I also find myself listening to a lot of podcasts. But I've realized that usually listening to podcasts is much better and seamless on Overcast, which is strictly a service for podcasts. And the reason I find it more useful is because whenever you add a podcast, it allows you to very easily navigate, and it notifies you of the new episodes that, say, those podcasters have released, and that's pretty useful. And obviously the categorization feature and the way the UI of the app is pretty useful for me, much more than what Spotify has right now. And that's why I tend to use both Spotify for music and Overcast for podcasts. That's as far as music app goes. And yes, Tabs is something that I also use on a regular basis because I'm learning to play the guitar. And the best thing about Tab is that it just allows you to quickly get access to the video and the guitar tabs of any particular song at the same time. And that process is so seamless and efficient that it makes the entire thing seem very easy to do and not hard at all. So let's say if I want to, sing Love Someone by Lucas Graham. So I go over here, go to version 1, and when I do that, this is the official tab, and I can essentially auto scroll it, I can play the video and see how I'm doing, and the process is pretty seamless, and I'm happy to pay a couple of dollars for this great service. Then as far as other categories go, let's talk about learning. As far as learning goes, I'm pretty excited about MasterClass because I've got the yearly subscription and I'm using it on desktop, but having the phone app is also pretty cool. Right now I'm taking this course by R.L. Stein on learning, and that's a pretty useful course, and just having access to it on the phone is also pretty cool and useful to me. WolframAlpha is definitely something that I recently downloaded only to give it a shot. It's like a virtual super assistant which is much more, or at least they claim that it's much more intelligent than say Siri, and I was excited to try that, so I just downloaded it, and let's see how it goes. I don't have any questions as such, so I'm not going to enter anything just for the heck of it, but let's see how that goes. Tide is essentially a focus, meditation and sleep app that plays useful and calming and focused sounds whenever you are doing an activity that is related to any of these categories. And it's useful because, if I want to focus for, let's say, 25 minutes, I'm using the Pomodoro technique. I'll just set the timer and the ocean sound will play. And the ocean sound plays, I'll just work for 25 minutes, and then after 25 minutes it will remind me. And I find that to be a pretty cool thing, especially on the days when I'm sort of distracted. Yeah, you can change the wallpapers over here, change the themes. I haven't gone for the paid version yet, but I want to try it first, to an extent that I do feel that I do have the need for the paid version, and only then will I sort of switch to the paid version. Quizlet, TED, and Wikipedia are again basic apps. The reason I downloaded Wikipedia was because it allows you offline access to a lot of resources, and that's something that I find pretty useful if I want to go into a Wikipedia rabbit hole, especially in places where I don't have any internet access, when I'm hiking or something like that. I don't know. That's when I find it useful. Then I obviously have these apps. As far as reading also continues and learning continues, one app that I find particularly useful is Instapaper. And the best thing about Instapaper is that it allows you to read articles when you have the time. So let's say if I come across an interesting article, let's say I go The Atlantic, COVID-19, and I come across this interesting article, but I don't have the time to read it right now. What I can do is, for starters, I can definitely post it on Notion in my Knowledge Hub, and that is what will happen, and it will automatically get synced, and that's a really useful feature of Notion, and that's another reason why I highly recommend downloading Notion. The other thing I could do is to add it to Instapaper, and that's it. It's saved now, and later, say after a few hours, when I do have the time to read that article, I'll open Instapaper, I'll go over here, and I'll refresh it, and How the Pandemic Will End is automatically saved. And another cool feature about Instapaper is that I can literally highlight stuff that I think is pretty useful, and then select it and select it and share it with a few people. And that I find is pretty useful. So let's say if I go to Messenger and if I write, if I want to share this with Kanyes, I can essentially share the excerpt that I find pretty useful along with the article link to any one of my friends. And that's a feature that I find is very useful for me because oftentimes I find myself sharing a lot of articles with my friends, but sharing specific excerpts and bringing their attention to what exactly is relevant to them and then linking the article is much more useful in actually getting them to read what I send them. So that's why I tend to use Instapaper. Other than that, for listening or for music, if I continue on that front, I have Metronome, Guitar Tuner, and Sonos, which are cool apps because Guitar Tuner essentially allows me to tune the guitar. Metronome it allows me to sync up my beats and the rhythm with any song, and Sonos obviously to control the music. And the last two apps that I haven't really talked about are Document and Chuck. You may have noticed that I don't have Gmail, and the reason is because I found this to be a pretty interesting email client because it groups all messages by senders. And that is an idea that I've long been thinking about, and I hope that there would have existed some app that does that. And finally I came across Chuck. And the best thing is that, if I have, let's say, emails from Banana Republic, I can delete all of them in one go. And I can delete all of these emails in one go, and that batching and that smoothness of, say, deleting all these emails and clearing up your inbox is something that I find to be pretty useful in Chuck. I can also group them by subjects. I can also group them by time, and I can also just have them as messages in the classic inbox format. I would agree that the UI of Chuck is probably not as intuitive as that of Gmail, but at the same time, I don't usually use email on my phone. If at all I want to send an email, which is rare, I usually use my laptop. But just to get rid of email and continue clearing my inbox, I find Chuck to be pretty useful. And the last app that I wanted to talk about was Documents. And Documents is a particularly useful app because it essentially makes your iPhone into, it's like the Finder for your iPhone, and it allows you to connect your iPhone with your desktop locally in a very seamless manner. And you can connect multiple accounts to Documents. So let's say if I go to my connections, I have these two accounts already connected. So I can go to one of them, and I can just see what do I want to open. So let's say I want to open this particular video. It just opens up properly and reliably over here. Whereas in Google Drive and in other apps, other storage apps, what I found is that oftentimes there are problems of videos not opening or documents not opening and so on and so forth. And usually if I really have to use a storage app, I use it on my desktop, but this is just there for quick and easy access. And as far as connecting it to your desktop goes, if I go and I go to computer, it will generate a random code. I go to my desktop, I go to this link, and that's when I can connect to all the files on my iPhone stored in a very organized manner onto my desktop. And then I can transfer photos and transfer music and do all that kind of useful stuff very seamlessly. And I think these kind of little things add a lot of value in how I am able to sort of make my life and make my workflow a bit more productive than usual. And I guess that's pretty much it as far as my apps go. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you have any feedback on my videos or the apps. I'm always open to and always looking forward to learn and just explore with new stuff. Thank you so much for watching.